Well, evening, everyone. This is Scott Anderson with AgriBest Feeds. I want to welcome you to our webinar here this evening, uh, focused on soil health, Redmond's 1-2 punch. And as we get started here, I just wanted to introduce AgriBest Feeds and what we're all about. We're about enhancing lives, especially farmer and ranchers' lives. And how can we come alongside and take what you've got and make that a little bit better? We do that through uniquely better products and superior customer service. So Tim, if you want to advance that slide there. So as we started out, AgriBest started back in 2006, 2007. We formed a family corporation. It was started off with our flagship product, Sweet Pro. And one of the big things that we were focusing on is the microbes in the rumen and how to maximize genetic potential with the focus on if you can feed the microbes, get the right environment for the microbes, that rumen functions the best, and then the cattle function really well. And that was very significant. And of course, tonight we're talking about the soil, and our understanding is that a lot of similarities between microbial populations and activity in the rumen and that microbial population and activity in the soil. So once again, if we can focus on the microbes and the soil health, there's a lot of things that we can benefit from through whether it's rangeland, crops, or hay ground. So very excited about kind of connecting this evening with that. As just a quick introduction to Redmond, how our company ended up getting connected with Redmond is we had this value-added product, the Sweet Pro, that complete supplement, had everything the cattle needed, has salt in it, but we recommend having salt out on the side, and it's expensive salt lick if they're just mining the Sweet Pro for the salt content. Anyway, my father-in-law, we're a family company. My father-in-law was at a trade show, and a representative from Redmond was there. And the representative from Redmond said, you know, we like the distribution footprint that you guys have, and you say you should have salt out on the side with your Sweet Pro. Why don't you guys market the Redmond Salt? And so my father-in-law called my brother-in-law Daryl and myself and said, what do you guys think about marketing the Redmond Salt? And we answered, said, we're not interested at all. Salt is salt is salt. Salt's a commodity, and we're not a commodity company. Well, you see how much weight we carry in the company. We're marketing the Redmond Salt. And a very interesting thing was the first semi-load that we sold was for soil application on hay ground up in central Montana. And we went ahead and sold that semi-load to the guy, and but then I got on the phone with Redmond and I said, well, either this guy is crazy or I'm missing something, because I don't think you should be putting salt on soil. And they said, Scott, you're missing something. This is beyond salt. This is more than just salt. There's sea minerals. It's sea minerals with it. And gave me a couple of books to read, and I'm sure Tim will maybe touch on those real quickly. But Sea Minerals in Agriculture, Sea Energy Agriculture by Dr. Maynard Murray, and Salt Your Way to Health by Dr. David Brownstein. Anyway, that background, we have been doing some work on soil health now for a number of years, and are really ready to launch that division in our company, and are really excited here this evening to hear more about that. And our special guest is Tim Williams. He's Redmond's soil specialist, and I guess we've known each other now, Tim, for what,
five years,
something like that.
Yeah.
And have spent a lot of time, and I've learned a lot on soil health. And so, Tim, if you can just kind of take us through a little bit this evening, working on a little bit of the background from Redmond, where the Redmond products come from, and then some of the things that you're seeing on that. And then just some things for our attendees. If you've got any questions, there's a Q&A button on the bottom if you want to type in any questions there, or you can hit the chat. Here, as soon as Tim's done, we'll have a Q&A where we can, you'll be able to raise your hand and we'll be able to interact at that point. So at this point, Tim, you want to go ahead and take things over?
All right. Thank you, Scott. Really appreciate the opportunity to present tonight. And I'm very excited about this. We've got some new information to share that you might be one of the first groups to actually hear some of this. So I have a background of about 17 years now in soil health, with the last 5 being with Redmond. And the interesting thing, I was thinking about this the other day, Redmond has actually probably been researching these products on the soil for close to 15 years, because we've been doing it the last 5 since I've been here, more with private research and field research. But before that, they had already been hearing feedback from out in the field about success using salt or clay conditioner or combination of it. So this is not something that we just decided to get into overnight. This has been long coming, and what I appreciate about Redmond is that they have really done their due diligence with research and science to help understand it, help being able to help our customers understand it as well. So it didn't start with Redmond. Actually, you can see on this slide, Scott mentioned him, that's a photo of Maynard Murray. He wrote the book, Sea Energy Agriculture. It's a short read, it's a great read if you wanna really get to understand how this kind of all started. But he was a medical doctor, a scientist, and in the 50s, for many years, I think close to 30, 40, maybe 50 years of his life, he focused on the benefit of ocean water and the impact it would have on plants and animals, and then also people. And there's just, I'm gonna cover just a few quick concepts because it's really important to know that there's different kinds of salt out there. Ours is natural. There's denatured salt out there. Ours is from an ancient sea salt deposit. There's salt out there from freshwater deposits. So ours is from an ancient deposit. But one of the key concepts is he discovered that the minerals in salt are in what's called the crystalloid form. Some call it the crystalline or crystalloid, but basically it goes into solution very easy. And when it's in solution, it has the ability to go through into the cellular level of a person, an animal, a plant, really any living system that has a cell. Our salt can have a really impact on that because of how available it is. It's a quick example of it. I always love this. If you go to the hospital, they'll typically give you a IV of salt water, saline. And they do that because doctors know what I just explained. They know that a patient can really recover quickly. A lot of times they're dehydrated, and we know that there's a lot of electrolytes in salt. So animals or people can recover very, very quickly with salt. So where do sea minerals come from? Just quickly, volcanic activity, underwater vents that shoot up minerals, thousands of these in the ocean. And then erosion, a lot of the minerals gradually end up in our waterways and back in the ocean. So I think it's interesting that the first one there, volcanic activity, well, that's what our clay is. Our clay is weathered volcanic ash. So the other thing that Maynard Murray really brought to the attention of a lot of farmers and industry folks was that the analysis of elements in human blood is basically identical to the analysis of minerals in ocean water. That's how perfectly balanced minerals are in ocean water. Part of that is because there's a perfect balance. If there's any excessive minerals, they simply fall to the bottom of the ocean. And what he discovered was he did a lot of biopsies on ocean life, and he discovered that there just wasn't the diseases in sea creatures, and there wasn't aging diseases, there wasn't cancer, and the health was just amazing because of living in that perfect environment. This shows sodium in blood. So this shows our salt, our pink Redmond salt. It's called number 10 or number 4. That is like 93% salt or sodium chloride, and then the other 7% is 60 plus other minerals, just like what we see in this slide in blood. So this is an old diagram showing just some of the interaction between minerals. And if you follow the lines and the arrows, it's really quite amazing, just that synergism that is really found in nature. This is really what's found in nature. It's complex, there's different forms of minerals. And this could be a lot larger really, because in nature there's like 92 minerals in the elemental table. They're all interrelated, they all work together. We don't understand but just a little bit of that. These arrows just show some of the relation. So this here shows the actual, our salt mine. The deposit is about mile deep, couple miles long. There's about 16 miles of these tunnels right now. And we've been mining out of this since the 50s. And the way it got started, the Bouchard family, well, there was a lot of little salt mines in this area. It was well known that there was a high quality salt. Livestock loved it. And the Bouchard family had some tough times farming. And they just sensed and felt that if they dug down or blasted down, they'd probably find a salt deposit. And they did. They found this deposit, and then they bought out their neighbors, and Redmond is going full bore ever since, actually. So Utah was covered by an ancient ocean during the Jurassic era. This is what geologists say. During the Jurassic era, the ocean dried up. There was a lot of earthquakes, and this deposit at the bottom of this ocean basically got pushed up to the surface. And as it rose to the surface, instead of staying horizontal, it turned vertical. And because it's vertical, it's got a natural pillar system. So they have never had to reinforce the ceilings or the walls with anything, and they've never had a cave-in. So all these photos you see here are that's all salt rock, that whole thing around there. Scott's been down there a number of times. It's pretty neat. The tunnels all wind down there, and it's pretty amazing. Above ground, there was volcanic activity, and basically it dumped this. It's a smectite family of clay, also known as a bentonite or Montmorillonite clay. And this got dumped right on top of the mine, the salt mine, and geologists say that's one reason that deposit is in such good shape, because this acted as a blanket over the top of it. So when we get into, and just keep in mind that our salt and clay is just all natural. We don't process it to any degree where we change the makeup of it, the mineral content of it. And that's a lot different than a lot of white salt. A lot of white salt, they take the micronutrients out through harsh processes. They denature it, and that changes the flavor, and also takes away a lot of the mineral value of it as well. So what I liked about the Redmond salt is it's all natural, the way it was meant to be. So I have to add that, so the last company I was with before Redmond, they used Redmond products on their nutrition side for livestock. So I was familiar with them in livestock. but they did not really promote them on the soil. In fact, I heard many, many times, we need to move towards low salt or no salt fertilizer. So my journey, so to speak, has been to really understand this, because I want to be able to talk intelligently about this, and we want to be able to promote this and understand it and really explain the benefits and the results of what happens when you use these products. So it's been a great learning curve. It's been a real challenge, and it's been a lot of fun just learning and wrapping my head around these products, and they are really, really something else. So I'm going to try and explain some of that. So when we look at the three things for Redmond for soil, first one, improves soil quality, improves feed quality, and it's quite simple to use. It's not simple to understand, but because it's very complex, the products are, but it is simple to use. So we're going to start out with soil quality. So we have been doing private research where we have replicated plots, like 4 replicated plots for the last 4 years, basically. We've looked at combinations of the salt and clay alone, together with other industry NP and K, other products. And we've been doing that for 4 years now. Looked at it on corn, we've looked at it, or corn silage, we've looked at it on grass, on alfalfa. And this is some of what we're going to talk about. This was from our first year. There's this, there's a test that you can do called a Solvita test. They basically measure how many microbes there are in a soil test. And what they measure is the amount of mineralizable N and the amount of biomass carbon, and you can see the columns there. What we discovered is when we put on the Redmond Salt, believe it was 100 pounds an acre compared to a control industry NP and K, we dramatically increased the microbes in the soil, because as the microbes go up, the mineralizable N and the biomass carbon goes up. So you can see on grass there how it increased, and on corn silage how they both increased as well. It was kind of an aha moment for us, because so then we took the salt and we sent it into a lab, actually Midwest Labs in Omaha, Nebraska, and we learned that our salt was just loaded with energy, loaded with electrical conductivity. Our clay did not have very much in it at all. So our clay brings something else to the picture, and we'll get into that in a little bit. So there we get into, we also looked at, in the first 2 years, we were looking at what happened with organic matter and CEC. This was never on, this was always on new plots in a new location every year. So it's important to note that. So year 1 to year 2 on organic matter, we saw a 15% increase. CEC, cation exchange capacity, which is like your soil holding capacity, gas tank of the soil, we saw 10%. Year 3, so for year 1 and 2 was a sandy loam soil. Year 3 was more of a really nice 5% organic matter, like silt loam, clay loam soil. And we still saw an increase on that soil as well. So that was really an eye-opening experience for us too. Then after year 3 on that really nice 5% organic matter soil, we did this test where we sent, I don't know if you've heard of Elaine Ingham, she's a known soil specialist. She has her own specialty labs across the country where she can really analyze the different bacteria and microbes and so forth in the soil. So the one column on the right where it says fertilizer, that's the regular treatment, like industry treatment, which was only 30 pounds an acre of potassium. Redmond, there was no potassium, and all we just put on different balances of salt and clay. And we saw a big jump in the active beneficial bacteria. You can see from 16 to 57 of those units. So that's pretty dramatic. Then what happened when there's more beneficial bacteria, that increased the food source. And so protozoa feed on beneficial bacteria. So all of a sudden the protozoa showed up where before they didn't. Then the protozoa happened to help deliver nitrogen. So all of a sudden we started seeing nitrogen become available as well. So one other thing we saw, this goes back in Illinois, there was a researcher there who wanted to test our salt and see the benefit it would have against parasitic nematodes. So, some of the, soil is known for this really nice, dark, rich soil. But they have issues with nematodes on alfalfa and especially on soybeans. So he looked at our salt on both, and we were able to decrease the amount of parasitic nematodes by about 50% or so. And if you think of how that happens, well, in nature, you always have competition between good microbes and bad microbes. And just like us, we know that we have cancer in us, and as long as we keep the environment in check, usually it's not an issue. And the soil is the same way. If you can keep the good, in this case, nematodes, higher than the bad ones, you're going to keep them in check, and there's not going to be big issues. Well, a lot of that is changing as our soils get stressed, the environment gets stressed, we get more moisture, we get more severe droughts. That creates an environment for the bad guys. But anyway, we saw an increase when we put the salt on. So this is brand new from this year in Nebraska. This was on really light soil, sandy soil, irrigated. And when we took a test, the first test, forget how many days it was out. Do you remember, Scott? Was it 30 days? It might have been 30 days, I forget. But anyway, here's what we saw. The bad nematodes in the soil were 16 times higher in the untreated, 5 times higher in the roots. And the good nematodes on the treated, which had 100 pounds of our SR65, had 3 times more good nematodes in the roots. So we saw that, what we saw in that Illinois research being repeated in Nebraska. So you're probably thinking, well, what is SR65? SR just means stress relief. 65, the number is always the percent of clay. So this would be 65% clay and then 35% salt in this product. That test was done in Lincoln, Nebraska at NEMA-Test. And there to the right, that's the actual test. So let me get into feed quality. So this here shows like over 13 different farms across the country on a combination of either alfalfa or grass. This is the average point increase Redmond had versus no fertilizer. So TDN, total digestible nutrients, 6 points, relative feed value 16, and the yield was about 0.2. So we have to remember our salt and clay has no nitrogen in it. And the phosphorus and potassium levels are very, very small. So it's basically a secondary nutrient and a micronutrient and rare earth mineral product is what you could say. It doesn't mean that it doesn't make more N, P, and K available, however, and that's what we found. So now this gets into our third-party research on the alfalfa. Not going to spend a lot of time on this. I just want to make a point that we saw an increase in TDN, relative feed value overall, and a little bit of yield increase as well on alfalfa. Year 3 is really, really important because year 3 was on that, what I'm going to keep calling high organic matter soil that I mentioned earlier, had that 5%. And after 30 days of application, we saw no results on TDN and relative feed value, no increase. I'm thinking, oh no, what in the world's going on, you know? And then 30 days later, we saw an increase of 3.6 points in TDN and 18 points on relative feed value. And what I've seen over the years being involved in this, it takes some time to work with nature and to work with biology. So unless you're foliar applying our salt, for example, it's going to take anywhere on average, usually 30 to 60 days before you really start seeing it showing up. Doesn't mean it's not working already, but just to optimize, it's going to take a while. So that was impressive. Year 4, which we actually skipped year 4, and this was this year's research on alfalfa replicated plots. We went against a really nice alfalfa fertilizer called 3-10-25, and it's got sulfur in it, it's got calcium, it's got micronutrients, and from a company I highly respect, very familiar with the product. And we use that as a control. We put on 200 pounds an acre, and then of that product, and then we put on another treatment was 200 pounds of SR50, which would have been a 1-to-1 ratio of salt and clay. And then we use some different combinations. The one that performed the best was actually the 100 pounds of the 3-10-25 and 100 pounds of the SR50. So again, that reinforced what we know is that you have to get NP and K from somewhere. If your soil's got higher amounts in it, okay, that's great. But you got to keep the tank full of NP and K because NP and K are macronutrients and they're very, very critical. So that's important to do. So it's either through manure or other fertilizer with NP and K in it. So that reinforced what we already knew about that. So this here shows a test from Pennsylvania where a farmer put on 4 pounds an acre of our salt as a foliar, sprayed it on, and he put it on to control leaf hoppers, and he wanted to see what would happen. So we just thought, well, I was out there at the time. It's like, let's do some clippings. Let's send it in. Let's see what happens. And I was blown away from these results. This was only 4 pounds an acre, which the cost wouldn't be over $1 an acre to do this. And you can see the big increases. Can you see my arrow when I do that, Scott? Okay, so you can see the increases all the way down. And then one of these digestibility, you can see a big increase. Relative feed value, 9 points, and relative feed quality, 14 points. So that was, again, an eye opener. And he felt that it did help control leaf hoppers. He believes in it so much. I talked to him probably 2 weeks ago. He is now putting it on. He put this on after second cutting. He's now putting it on after third cutting as well. And he's probably going to start putting it on after first cutting. And he puts on about 200 pounds an acre of SR50 or SR65 at green up on his alfalfa. He's been very, very happy with the results. So corn silage now. Here's what we saw in our private research, and year 1 and year 2. Year 1, we put on extra manure, we put on extra industry NP and K. Ours, 300 pounds SR65, 51 pounds of nitrogen. That's the treatment that did the best. We probably had like 8 treatments, all different combinations. And here's those results. Big one, starch. That's a big jump. If I remember right, I believe it was like a 45 starch. Now 30 to 35 is probably more average, and we were able to jump it up to a 45. Yield went down a little bit, probably because we lowered the amount of nitrogen compared to the control. Control had 81 units, we had 51. A year two, this is where it gets interesting. Year two, the soil we were on, it was a sandy loam, called for 150 units of nitrogen and 140. You know what we did? We took away all the nitrogen on our treatments, took away the manure, no extra NP and K. See that? No NP and K. And 100 pounds of SR35 performed as good as any other treatment. That would have been 35 pounds per acre of clay and 65 pounds of salt. And our TDN was just a little higher. Starch was a little higher. And here's the one that was amazing. We yielded 1.5 ton more with less nitrogen and less potassium. So that was kind of another aha moment for us. So this year in Pennsylvania, or in Ohio, excuse me, one of our dealers over there, and he's a nutritionist, he took 4 farms and put on 200 pounds of SR50 to the corn silage. We decided, let's take a look and see what happens to the toxins when we put that on. We know that our conditioner has an impact on toxins. We've done the research on the livestock side, 99% effective against aflatoxins, and it's effective against other toxins too. So these toxins here are the key ones that they're seeing issues in corn silage around, I should say in the Midwest, in the East. I'm not sure about out West and other areas. But Alltech, you've maybe heard of Alltech. We decided to send the tests in. We saw 8 times improvement over this species, 4x over this, the acid. And they have this thing called a risk equivalent quantity. And what that is, it's the potential of toxins affecting the health of the animal and resulting in a big milk production. 18 times less where we put our product on. So brand new from this year, another big eye opener for us. This is from Eastern Wisconsin. I live in Wisconsin. Talked these guys and right up by Lake Michigan to run a trial for us. They're looking for a new micronutrient pack. And they run a lot of trials. I was really impressed with their operation. And these are the results. So this was on soybeans. Haven't done a lot on soybeans. And this is on grain corn. We've done more with corn silage. So here you can see we did 200 pounds of SR50. And we did that on both the soybeans and the corn. We also did 200 pounds of our product, and then we did their regular program, and then the third treatment was their regular program. Here's the results on the beans. 89, 88, and 89. Test weight was about the same. So that was pretty impressive. They're scratching their head right now, because if you do the calculations on that based on fertilizer prices a couple of weeks ago, we would have saved them $60 an acre on their fertilizer costs. Now you look at the corn. The corn with 200 pounds of SR50, we came in at about 205 bushel. The other treatment with ours over the top of theirs, 200 about 214, and then with 150 pounds of that's their regular program. They came in at like 218. So here's the difference, and this is a big difference. All the corn at planting was planted with 5 gallons of 624-6 in furrow and 15 gallons of 32%, including ours. But when you run the calculations, we would have saved them about $190 an acre on less NP and K. So you might be thinking, okay, why didn't we see more in the second treatment? Where we just put it over the top? Here's what I think is going on, and I've seen this over the years. In soil, you're always looking for balance, right? So balance is having, it's not only when something is out of balance, it's not only having too little, it's also you can put too much. Every living system can only hold so many minerals, including you and I. Animals the same way. That's why we have rations, right? Well, what happened in the soil, I think, is we just got too many minerals. And when you get too many minerals, what happens is you start displacing minerals and you just overload the biology and the plant, and you end up with, it doesn't mean you get negative results, but what it ends up is, I believe, you just waste a lot of fertilizer dollars when you keep putting more and more on, for example, to drive yield. We like to joke around and call that the moron approach. It just doesn't work that way. You just can't. We know it doesn't. Otherwise, why couldn't you just double your fertilizer and double your yield? Well, does that work? No, it doesn't work. There's always a sweet spot, whether it's livestock nutrition, human nutrition, soil nutrition, plant nutrition. There's a balance and there's a sweet spot, and that's what we got to find. So Redmond sea minerals for salt on the soil, we say yes. Now, a lot of people they're not comfortable with salt, but fertilizer is actually salt with minerals, is really what it is. And we could get into a big, deep discussion. We're not going to do that. But when a lot of people think of salt, they think of the grass next to their sidewalk where they put a bunch of salt on their sidewalk, it washes off and it kills the grass. So they think, well, I'm not going to put salt on my ground because it just kills everything. Well, yeah, if you use it at 10 to 20 times the amount you should be on the soil, potentially that would happen. So what we've done is we have actually looked at we've got farms in Pennsylvania that have been using our SR50 or SR65 for 7-8 years. We're looking at soil tests, we're looking at feed tests, we're watching sodium and chloride levels. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this because it could be a lengthy discussion, but I can tell you forages, haylage, and grass should have sodium levels of about 0.15%. Chloride can be 1% or under. So we're right in those ranges. And on this haylage, relative feed value 153, relative forage quality 164, TDN 65. We regularly see on our research and with customers increase in TDN 3 to 5 points and relative feed value or relative feed quality anywhere from 10 to 30 points. That is very, very common when you start adding our products into what that farmer's doing, either just adding it to manure, replacing some other fertilizer, cutting back on fertilizer, adding it with it. That's the kind of results we're seeing. This is some more, shows a couple other ones where we're right in the range after 6 years, 2 other different farms as well. And then on soil tests, we look at a few things. So if you're nervous, we always want to establish a baseline. We look at you can see We look at sodium, we want that to be under 5% in the base saturation. Then we look at sodium parts per million. You can see here it's very low, and then soluble salts, we want it to be like under 1 of these units. And on this test, it was also very low. And this is after 6 years after using our products. So we're seeing is the amount of salts we're putting on is not dramatically driving that up. And I've talked to a number of different labs, and basically they've all agreed if we're having enough moisture, because moisture is what washes salts out of the soil. So where we have enough moisture, we're losing our salts. And when you have low electrical conductivity, you have low energy. You need electrical conductivity to give microbes their energy. And if you have more microbes and with more energy, they reproduce, and you're going to have more minerals make available to the plant. You're also going to have better decomposition of residue, and you're going to increase your organic matter. You're going to create a healthier environment for the biology when you have the right amount of electrical conductivity. You don't want too much. But when we're putting on, we're trying to get 50 to 100 pounds an acre of salt. And when you do that, it's like you're taking a salt shaker and seasoning your soil. It's about the rate that you put it on your food. So another benefit we see, enhances the flavor of forages. That's crucial for alfalfa and pasture, corn silage. That's all a big benefit. We hear of things like less rust in grasses. We hear of better weed control when you get more mineral balance in the top soil as well. So those are all some side benefits. The one other thing I've learned about sodium and chloride, chloride is one of your top 16 essential elements, and yet I'm seeing chloride, a lot of soils are lacking chloride around the country. You have to have chloride for complete photosynthesis. If you're lacking chloride, you're going to have a shortage of minerals up in that plant. We put this chart together. This is brand new. So it's based on usage recommendations. You can see it's based on soil type here on the left. And then this would be the CEC typically of these soil types. So these are their 3 key blends. SR35 would be 35% clay, 65% salt. SR50, 1-to-1 ratio. SR65, 65% clay, 35% salt. So depending, we're usually 100 to 200 pounds an acre, usually. And then Redmond Salt, you can see if you use the salt alone, 50 to 100 pounds an acre. Full year, 3 to 5 pounds an acre, 3 to 5 times a year. And conditioner would be, if you use that alone, you could be at 100 to 200 pounds an acre, or 50 to 100, depending on your soil type. We have seen, like one of the first slides, it's a 1-2 punch, just like on livestock. They both bring different things to the soil program. The salt really brings that EC, that electrical conductivity. What the clay brings is you don't have as much salt, you don't have as much electrical conductivity, but you have higher amounts of cation exchange capacity, which means that clay will hold moisture and release the moisture, and hold minerals and release the minerals in the root zone. And because there's less salt in there, the amount of remaining minerals in our conditioner, 2 to 5 to 10 times higher than in the salt. So one example, calcium. In our salt, there's about 0.5%. In our clay, there's about 5%. So you see a lot more the concentrations of the minerals are higher in the clay. And that's one of the benefits you're getting. But I've also learned about salt. Having the right amount of salt will, it's called osmosis. It will bring water to the root system. Now, if you have too much salt, it pulls it away from the root system, and that's when you get root dehydration, which is also known as root burning. So you probably heard of that. So yeah, you don't want salt to get out of hand in your soils, that's for sure. And that's why we do the testing to establish a baseline. So we talked about this, but just quickly again, clay is the CEC. That's the 1-2 punch, you know, and then the salt is the high electrical conductivity. What makes this work, though, in my mind, is this is nature's perfect balance of 60 plus highly available nutrients, again, working in harmony. A plant does not utilize as high levels of micronutrients and rare earth minerals as N, P, and K. However, does it make it any less important? I don't believe it does, because a plant will pull a lot more than just N, P, and K from the soil. And I think a lot of times the industry has been pulling all these micronutrients and rare earth minerals from the soil for years and years and years. And I think that's one reason why when we put it on, we're seeing responses. So we really feel these products can be the foundation of every mineral program on the farm, whether it's on livestock, whether it's on the soil. These products work, and you just got to find how to place them and find the sweet spot for these products, and they'll do some pretty amazing things for you.
Well,
I
perfect.
believe
Thanks.
Yep.
Thanks, Tim.
Yeah.
That's just awesome. So we got a number of people on the call here with us, and just want to open it up for some Q&A. So you can either type your question in the Q&A box or hit the chat box, or just raise your hand, and I'll just unmute you and you can visit back and forth. It's great having Tim on the line with us, and take about 5 or 10 minutes and just answer any of your questions that you might have.
And Scott, while we're waiting for some of these questions, you know, I dumped a lot of information on you quick, and you maybe never heard of some of this before, so you might want to think about it some more. Feel free to give me a call and talk to me more about this again. I'm more than happy to talk with you. So.
Okay, let's see. I got to get this down. Okay, this is from Mary. This, I believe, Mary, you were from central Nebraska there. Would you use this on alkali-rich soils that can't grow anything well?
So first of all, I guess I'd want to zero in on why can't it grow anything well? You know, is it pH? Is it just the soil type? What is it? And so what I like to do is start out with a really good, complete soil test to figure out what's going on that has that electrical conductivity test on it, soluble salt test, and your sodium level, chloride levels, and just get a good picture of what's going on. You can also do a test that measures the biology, which I really like, and that'll explain, basically, it'll show you the efficiency of your microbes. So a lot of it is you kind of got to put your detective hat on. And I don't want to portray this as a miracle product, because it's not. There's really no miracle products out here in the industry. A lot of it's based on soil science, sound management principles, and doing a good soil test every 3 years for sure is part of that good soil program, actually. So I hope doesn't sound like I'm dodging that issue. Potentially, I'm going to say yes. If you are lacking salts and you're lacking micronutrients and rare earth minerals, definitely this can help you, definitely. But it kind of depends what's the rest of the story on your soil. What's the history of the soil on your farm? What kind of fertilizer have you been using? Have you seen yields maintain? Have you seen them climb? How have you gotten them to climb? There's so many factors that influences this, that's something you got to kind of dig into, but establish that baseline first. You can always get some of our product and try it, run it on some ground and see if you see any benefits from it. If you don't want to, spend that much time on doing new soil tests and all this other things, you can just give it a try that way.
Yeah, a lot of times that's what we're looking at doing is, if you got an alpha field, excuse me, or something to be able to do some strips, some portions of fields, or in some of these tough areas, just do some different trials, and we're learning and super excited about that. Quickly to answer this, where the salt mine is, Redmond, Utah is where the Redmond Salt mine is located. And then it's my understanding there's 2 salt mines in the world that has a plethora of minerals still intact. Redmond, Utah is the one, and the other one is Himalayan salt, if you've ever heard of that, located over in Pakistan, I believe.
Yeah, there's a couple of mines over in Pakistan that have a similar type of product.
All right, other questions? Raise your hand and we can put you on here live. Or type your question out. Quick question, Tim. I know that there's some, and I've heard a lot about carbon credits and those types of things.
Mhm.
Looks like some indicators are showing that through, the increased carbon, the one that you showed there, and then also your organic matter, those seem like there's some indicators going in the right direction that may have value in that regard as well.
Well, and I think it's important to remember that carbon, increased carbon is the result of increased organic matter and improved soil health. And so if cover crops is a big thing that helps grow increase the organic matter and increase the carbon. They all go hand in hand. And then once you get the carbon, where the farmer is going to be able to tap into those credits is when he keeps it in the soil. So that's where cover crops plays a role in that, but also what are your tillage practices? So that's why the industry is really going down that tillage road, because the less you till your soil, the less you're going to kick loose that carbon into the atmosphere. So that's why no-till no-till or minimal tillage is becoming so popular. That's the reason. So it's a twofold thing. You can grow, you can increase the organic matter and the carbon, then you got to learn how to keep it there too. Then you'll be rewarded for it, is my understanding.
All right, other questions? About 5 more minutes here if there's more interest. If not, we can close things up here, but raise your hand if you got a question. I'll throw one more at you here while people are thinking of questions there, Tim. On where we don't have, we're not adding any microbes to the soil. What's the general, why are we saying we're focusing on microbial health and how is that, and why is that affecting the microbes like we're seeing?
Why are our products affecting the microbes so much?
Correct. Yep.
Well, like I mentioned earlier, the big thing is that electrical conductivity. It's bringing more energy. We like to joke around. Our team leader, Aaron, he likes to say that when you put our salt on the soil, it's like you're creating microbes on steroids because you're giving them so much energy. So again, if microbes are healthy, their nature's way is that they reproduce. And when they reproduce, they have a short lifespan. And one of the big ways that microbes provide minerals to the root system is actually through microbe poop. It's like their manure. And also, when they die off, they have the minerals in their body, and then that becomes available. It breaks down, decomposes, and then that's available to the root system. So that's really how that whole thing happens. And the more microbes you have too, you're going to be able to, those microbes will eat and decompose the organic matter, which then it can turn into more carbon and more humus in the soil long term. So it just creates that whole healthier environment. And then, like I said earlier, you get the good microbes that keep the bad microbes in check, so that you just flip that around, basically. Is that kind of what you're looking for, Scott?
Yep, that sounds great. Got a couple other questions. Charlene has one, and Keith are kind of back on the application side, both of them. One is, what's the best time to apply the salt and clay? And then also, can you apply it product dry in a row, or with an air drill, or just a top dress?
Yeah, those are great questions. So on sand, or excuse me, on alfalfa and grass, we like to put it on a green up. That's a really good time to do it. And I think the best program is put it on a green up, and then during stress periods, when a plant is stressed, there's a lack of minerals. So that's a perfect time to come in with our salt, foliar apply it, 3 to 5 pounds an acre. And we're also doing tests where we're running it through irrigation too. So whereas we learn more about this, we'll be sharing more about that as well. So that's in corn. Most of the time with corn, it goes on at planting. We have guys that run our product actually through starter boxes. Guys with bigger acres typically don't use starter much anymore. We are experimenting, learning more about what we need to do to our products to run them through a air spreader. And we're in the process of looking at our number 4 salt or number 10 salt will go through it fine, as far as we know. It'll flow through it, no problem. Clay is a little bit of a challenge. So we have a coarse product where we have bigger particles for broadcasting, but they're not always real consistent. So we're coming up with a clay product that is actually, it's not prilled, but it's more consistent. And we've done some preliminary tests, and it's worked really well in Utah. And Scott, I think you're going to be doing some testing, I believe. Aren't you on that?
Yep, we're running it through the air spreader. Keith's question on the air drill, those are a little bit challenging at this point. Broadcast spreader is pretty easy. We're good to go on that. But as far as through the air machines, that's where we're still working on fine tuning that, make it easier to handle, and even so a co-op can bring it in and mix it and spread it for you, those types of things.
Yeah.
Dana has a question. I'm going to unmute you there. Let's see. Can you go ahead and ask your question, Dana?
Actually, it's her husband, Mike.
Oh, go ahead, Mike. Why don't you? There you go. You sound, well, your voice is lower.
Yeah, she's better looking than I am, though. So,
I don't doubt that.
so Dan and I've been. We just recently started fertilizing our fields. They haven't ever been fertilized until just the last couple of years, and our yields were really low. They were below a ton an acre, and so everybody said, well, you need to put nitrate on it because our nitrate levels were low.
Mhm.
We have a high pH soil, like 8.2.
Mhm.
We have a high salt, which is 172 VH. And then our nitrate levels in that field are running about 5 pounds per acre.
Mhm.
Do we continue to if we use this, do we mix it with a nitrogen to keep our yields up?
So what's this on, grass or alfalfa or combo or what?
It's cool season grass, yes.
So all grass, 100% grass?
Yeah, there's a little bit of clover in there and there's a little bit of alfalfa, but
Okay, but mostly grass. Yeah, so grass, you really got to have nitrogen for health of that grass and also for driving the yield.
okay.
That'll be critical. And when you get in that high pH like that, when you get up there and over that 8, a lot of times your phosphorus is not very available. So one thing you can do, a really great test, what you can do is you can just run a forage test on your grass and see what the mineral levels are and where some of those things are, and that can give you a clue of the rest of the story, what's really going on. But yeah, I would say, so even if you have high salt soil, come in with a lower salt blend. And if you're nervous about that, then maybe you just come in with a salt as a foliar. But you're not going to dramatically, putting that small amount on, you're not going to dramatically add to it. So it's just going to become more of a delivery system of micronutrients for that crop.
Okay.
So I like using the combination approach. So, maybe you come in with less, and make sure you got your other nutrients covered. And yeah, don't sacrifice the nitrogen on that grass because you'll never get decent yields.
Okay. So another quick question. I have tissue samples on our grass and so forth and several.
Yeah.
Would you be willing, if I emailed those to you, would you
Sure.
be willing to help me with the program?
Yeah, I'd be happy to point you in the right direction. No problem at all. Now, so a lot of times when you do a tissue test, I can't remember if it is sodium included or chloride, one of them. I think it might be sodium. And I think what you can do is you can request for an upcharge, you can request some other minerals. So you could request the chloride levels to see where you're really at.
Okay.
But yeah, I'd be happy to take a look at them. And there normally is a chart where it shows if it's average or below average or high. It'll normally tell you that.
Okay. And I'm looking at my analysis on my tissue samples, and the chloride's not even marked on it, so I didn't get that.
What's the sodium on there? Is it high? And sodium is Na.
Okay, so I got a soluble salts,
Oh yeah, okay.
and that's 0.13.
Does it say what it's supposed to be at?
No, it doesn't. And the Na parts per million is 391.
Yeah, so that seems pretty high. Now I know typically your sodium levels on forages should be at 0.15 and you're at 0.13.
Yes.
So actually that's a very good range. I'd have to do some digging to see about, well, chloride is at what level?
Well, it doesn't show. It must not have been part of my test because it's not.
Oh, it wasn't. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I guess not to waste anybody's time, I'll be in touch with you.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd be happy to steer you in the right direction.
That would be good. We're excited about the product.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Mike and Dana. They're from down in Colorado, I believe. So thanks on that. Keith has another question there on application. Can you use 10-gallon fan tips with our sprayer, or is there a better way to foliar apply with the sprayer?
So I know there's gonna be a little bit of grit in the tank when you mix this up. So some guys will screen it out. It can plug your screens on your nozzles if you're not careful. So you got to make sure you can mix it in something so you don't get that grit in your tank. Some guys will mix it and then they'll just like a plug in the tank and they'll open the plug and then it'll kind of wash out and they'll put the plug in again. So you're going to have to kind of play around with it. I know if you run enough water, because typically if a guy runs 3 to 5 pounds an acre of salt, they're going to probably do 10 to 20, 25 gallons of water with it. But how much water are you looking at running through along with it? That's what I would want to know.
I don't know if you have a microphone there, Keith, and able to visit back and forth here on that. Have to unmute yourself.
Yeah, you there?
Yep.
Yeah, there you go.
There we go. Yeah, I whatever amount of water is kind of recommended. We run 10-gallon nozzles in it now, but it doesn't mean we can't change it over.
Yeah. So 10, you just got to kind of play around a little bit to see. You probably do you have some screens coming out of the tank, or what do you?
Yeah, so probably what we'd set up and do, because we foliar apply nitrogen and we pre-mix in a hot tank scenario, and then we would screen it coming out of there before it goes into the sprayer.
Yeah.
So we'd probably use the same system.
Yeah. I mean, you should be okay. It's just an all natural product, so you're going to get a little bit of grit that falls out on the bottom, but we got guys all over that do it. So you just got to be aware of it is the big thing.
So Tim, can that be applied together with the nitrogen? There's that mixed together with that?
Well, you always want to do a jar test. I've never heard of it interfering with nitrogen. In fact, we have plenty of farmers that actually mix this with chemicals and apply it. And they just, with the idea that if I'm adding anything to the soil or to the plant, I might as well be adding some minerals with it. So, a couple of pounds an acre, it's just going to help deliver the chemicals as well. So I haven't come across anything that this really conflicts with, but do the jar test just to be cautious. I can't imagine it being a problem. The big thing is you don't want to be, like if you're using it for corn, you don't want to put it on the seed. It's not considered seed safe. But you can put it all day long, dribble it next to it. We got guys that I mix it with 28 or 32%. So there's a lot of ways you can use it, and you're using such a small amount. That's the big thing, 3 to 5 pounds an acre. So when you foliar apply it, we found that the morning is the best time to foliar apply it. And maybe if you're mixing with nitrogen, there's going to be limitations with that. But if you're using our product alone, 3 to 5 pounds an acre with 10 to 20 gallons of water in the morning when the stomata and the leaves are open. And you want photosynthesis to be really working when you put that on the leaves, because those minerals are available, they're there, and you can see results really, really quick when you put it on that way. But just don't overuse it. Stay in that 3 to 5 pounds an acre, and you with a sufficient amount of water, and you'll be fine.
So Tim, I got on here,
Good.
2 pounds of Redmond per gallon. That'll go in solution. Is that about right?
Yeah, 2 pounds of Redmond salt.
Yep. You know, a
With-
gallon of water will go into solution, and you'd be able to mix that then in with whatever.
Yeah, I think that's the highest amount it'll absorb, I think. Yeah,
So that's just kind of a rule of thumb for.
yeah. That's not what you apply, but that's
Correct.
when you're mixing it. Yeah. Some guys like to mix it. Yeah, I've heard some guys mix it, 24 hours in advance, but we have a lot of guys that do it, a couple hours and, maybe even up to 5 hours, and they haven't had any issues with it. So.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Keith. Any other questions? I guess we're a little over time here. We want to respect your time. But if you have any other questions real quick, we can end on one last one if anybody has one. And I appreciate everybody showing up here this evening. If you have any questions, contact your dealer who invited you onto this webinar, or you can go to agribestfeeds.com. If you do a contact us off of there, that email goes directly to me. You'll also be getting a follow-up email that's automatically generated. That'll come from me, and so you can reply back and I can get you all of his contact information on that. So anyway, once again, thanks, Tim, for your time and wisdom here this evening, and thank everybody for attending. Hope everybody has a Merry Christmas and enjoy this season of time together.
Yeah.
Have a good
Thanks.
evening.
Merry Christmas.